guys? Thanks again for watching. This is RD Calamity here. We got a new series here for you today. I'm calling it the Tenno Legacy. Now what the Tenno's Legacy is going to be about, I'm going to dive into the lore of one of the most fast-paced and highly growing games out there, Warframe. As of this year, Warframe is celebrating its 11th anniversary. It has been on consoles since as early as 2013, PCs as 2011. One of the biggest things that got me into Warframe was not the gameplay itself, but it was the lore. This deep, intersecting, vibrant story that was told to me through gameplay, pieced together from flashbacks, tall tellings, and myths passed down. Now, as far as we know, not everything will be covered. Gameplay might be included, but this is the story, and this is how I'm going to tell it. Before we begin, I just want to let everybody know, thanks for watching. Remember to like, subscribe, and hit that bell for all your notifications with the Rabs crew and the Tenno Legacies. Today's wonderful subject will be the beginning of the tale as far as we know it, which comes down to the Orokin Empire and the origin system. We'll think alternate universe, shall we? Now Warframe takes place in a distant future. We're going to the distant past. The Orokin Empire, basically, Alex, I don't know why you're doing this to me, boy. The origin system is exactly like ours, and the Orokin Empire basically took it all over. The common referral point to this would be they were the Orokin era. Now the Orokin era is responsible for the current state of the system, including the terraformed planets and all that go with it. It's one of those things that I want to show you to make it a little bit better. So this is our beautiful origin system. Okay. Now, the Orokin Empire was based on Luau, which would be our moon, Earth's moon. And they spread out and they went everywhere that they could. Not much is known about the beginnings of the Orokin Empire. We kind of get into it centuries down the line, where they've already conquered the origin system. They're terraforming planets. I mean, come on. Let's look at Lua, for instance. Once it wants to scroll properly. Wrong button. There we go. There we go. That's our Lua right there. Our beautiful little moon, just right off of it. Now, let's get a little bit of information about this Orokin Empire, shall we? Now, it was evident from their architecture that the Orokins were obsessed with splendor, luxury, beauty, and access. They constantly favored the colors white, black, gold, and blue, and they built these massive structures. Anything from terraforming Lua to the solar rails that allowed for interplanetary travel quickly and sufficiently. All Orokin items share a luxurious design, from their architecture to everyday items such as bowls and spoons to weaponry, to even the Orokin body itself. High-ranking Orokins modified their bodies to attain a more aesthetically pleasing, wild, and beautiful appearance, and that came to them with blue skin and elongated right arm. They adorned themselves with jewelry. Their clothes were magnificent, flowing in beautiful colors to their standards. They were highly evolved civilization, both technologically and military-wise. However, within their classes, there was an emphasis placed on honor, propriety, loyalty to one's supervisors, and acceptance of the status quo. Let's break it down to a more easily understood process of slavery. Okay, the ones who had the money ran the show. The more money you had, the more influence you had, the more you could do. They were very conservative, but repressive. Class mobility and ascension, rising of the ranks through the echelon of society, was very limited. Most were basically expected to serve their quasi-divine masters without questioning any type of authority. And I say quasi-divine because based on the technology that the Orokin devised, the Orokin were basically immortal. And I say basically because the body was not. The mind, however, was. And the Orokins had this system called continuity. And basically what would happen is when an Orokin official's body starts deteriorating, starts giving away, they would do the continuity ceremony in which the old, grizzled, veteran Orokin leader, high-ranking official, whatever they may be, from executor to Archimedeans, they would take that person's consciousness, that Orokin's consciousness, and place it into what they would call a Yuvan. I'm not going to break this down any pretty. Yuvan were children. Yuvan were sold at markets, bought by high-ranking Orokin officials to serve as vessels for their consciousness. And they would do this continuously. The consciousness would go into a new body, everything would transfer to that new body, all stature, all money, all everything. So it's one of those things where, think of, was it Get Out? Kind of like that, but on a bigger, much bigger scales. Like, these ceremonies were elaborate, they were extensive, they were parties, they were celebrating the death of one body and the entrance into a younger state that can keep going on for the Orokin Empire. One of the ways that they kept the lower classes down was, if you were a lower class, you could be restricted to your access, and it was one of those things where you couldn't work with certain things. Like, if you weren't a high enough official, you couldn't even think about continuity. You knew what happened, you knew it was real, but you couldn't access that ability or that piece of technology if you didn't have the right stature within the Orokin society. Now, another one would be forcible genetic manipulation, i.e. their Grineer. The lower class were manipulated into their military class. And I don't mean manipulated like, oh, go do this. Like, they put them into containers, modified their DNA to where they would serve as basically big dumb brutes. And another form of the repression was the seizure of children to the Yuvan markets. We already discussed that. I hate touching that one because they did it all wrong. It wasn't like a ceremony. Oh, you were chosen. No, you were bought and you're going to do what you're told. Another way was the way they were punished. Now, there was dualism back in the early Orokin days in which it was done by till death. Like, that's the way they did shit. But they hit a kind of a corporal punishment, kind of like the Judge Dredd universe, where punishments were brutal, collective, and could include anything from mutilation, conversion into cephalons for perpetual solitude. Now, cephalons were these AI intelligences that worked to serve the Orokin. They were little floating robots, basically, that came floating around you. And they would do whatever you told them. They could not deny an order. Or execution. And their best method, their favorite, their most intense method of execution was the execution by the Jade Light. Now, not much is known about the Jade Light, but it would be put into comparison of a disintegration ray. And this wasn't, oh, you're on death row for years, hours. You were tried by the Seven, the Congress of Executors, high-ranking officials within the Orokin system. You were either found guilty or not, which by the time it got to the Seven, you were most likely found guilty, and your punishment was exacted right then and there. And the Jade Light was within the Congress of Executors because the most treacherous ones, apostasy and treason, immediate Jade Light. You were wiped off the face of the earth. They also, Orikins as a whole, rejected the automation of their industry via robots because they preferred the manual labor to keep the lower classes down, the serfs and the Grineer, keep them working to a perpetual end. You are only a cog in the machine, and once you wear out, we're going to replace you, but that's all you'll ever be. There is no more than being a cog in the machine. Now, when it came to the hierarchy of the Orikins, only the very top considered themselves Orokin. The Grineer were Orokin, but not by name. And they did have some emperors, but names and details are completely unknown. The emperors were more of a figurehead, a face, a little bit of power to dangle and be in charge. The ones who really ran things were the Congress Executors, also known as the Seven, and the Orokin High Court, which most is not known about what they actually took care of, considering the Congress of Seven is the one who decided everything. Now, under the Congress of Seven were the Executors. The Executors were the ones who ran the day-to-day things. They kept everything going. One of the most known Executors that we have to deal with within the Warframe universe is Ballast. Because remind you, the Orokin established immortality, and not all can be killed. Under the Executors are the Archimedeans, and one of our most well-known is Margulis, and we'll get into her story later. But Margulis is a very key player within the Warframe lore and how everything came to be. You also had Lorist, which were the healers, Sectaris, which were the navigators, engineers, whose their role was a little bit unknown. I butcher some things every once in a while. And the Temple Guardians, which I assumed guarded the temples of the deities that the Orikins worshipped, which were basically money, power, greed, and corruption ran rampant within the Orokin Empire, so much that there were people taking any power play that they could as quickly as they could. Now, although Orokin by creation, blood, nature, whatever it may be, the Grineer were not considered Orokin. They were their own race, as it were, the working class, the military class. Then you had the, they were also, the Grineer, since they were military class, they were genetically engineered as clones and slaves. Grineer's cloning system deteriorates after so many uses, and they were originally cloned from Orikins. So in our day and age, in the Warframe universe, where not many Orikins are still alive, the Grineers have resorted to cloning within the ranks. The closest that they have to the Orokin system would be the Grineer Queens, who were around at the fall of the Orokin Empire, but they weren't as close to the center of it all as they would make it seem to be. Another faction or class or race, as they made it to be, of the Orokin were the Corpus, and they were made up of the less wealthy and advanced, middle class, hard-working people that basically, I would take it as Grineer's military corpus becomes Wall Street. You know, they got a little bit of power because of the money they pull, but they don't pull anywhere near as the big dogs. They follow the teachings of Parvos Granum, very close, in which money makes money, which makes money. And money is the one thing that, no matter what, really runs everything, because for everyone there is the right price. How much do you need to get out of your hoe? What's going to take to get you to do this? It's the same follow-up story with every single one. A little specific class, because I won't even say species, a specific class of the Orchids were the Dax. And the Dax were the high-ranking military. They were the commanders. They were excuse me, the ones who told the Grineer where to go, how to go, and all that fun stuff. They were genetically engineered and enhanced with technology to be more lethal and agile. And during this process, they were also made to be mentally unable to disobey executors. So, if an executor got a bug up his ass and ordered a Dax to kill another being, the Dax would be required. Not even required, the Dax would do it. He'd have no option to say no, to stop the onslaught that he is perpetuating due to the fact of how it is. Now, the next thing we're going to get into is the Orokin beliefs. They had the 7 principles, which basically comes out to the best of the best. Speed, power, cunning, agility, endurance, cooperation, and stealth. With these belief systems, they believed that they could do whatever they wanted to do. Add that on to the highest technological achievements in the Origin system. Now, let's get into their little bit of technology, because we don't know much about it, but it's something that we dive straight in through. And that's the technology. They mastered biological engineering, allowing themselves to modify their own bodies. They constructed, of course, the Grineer, armies of clone slave labor. They invented a living weapon that proved to be nigh non-controlling, which we'll get into part 2. They produced terraforming drones that could adapt to any obstacle they encountered, convert invaders into unwavering allies, and created the almost indestructible humanoid warriors for the Tenno to command. And the Tenno is us. The Tenno is our group of people within the Warframe world. That is what you're playing as. You are playing as a Tenno. They also constructed the solar rails, like I had spoke before. Terraformed inhospitable planets to working, and they learned how to navigate the void. Now, with their obsession of luxury and dominance came the cost of learning to keep it, and that's where their continuities came in. Now, they created a lot of things, including the Kubros, the Kavats, our animals, anything with the name Orokin in it, really. Their written language was very scarce. The Entrati family was a big family in the past that helped the Orokin rise with their technologies. He is also the leader of the Entrati family, was also the first scientist to be known to access the void. Okay, now what this came to is the Orokin think the Mongols and Genghis Khan. They just never satisfied. They just kept taking and they just kept taking, and they hit a point that their greed would be their undoing. Now, what we're going to get into the next episode is a couple more of their technological advances, including the sentience. And we're going to talk more about the void, because the void is the key in all of this. The void is the end-all be-all. And it's one of those things that within the story, the void starts it all. Because the void starts the beginning of the end of the Orokin Empire. It was this obsession with the void and the resources on the other side. Because after certain centuries, the Orokin hit the point where they're running out of resources. They're running out of viable things to keep their machines going, to be able to do their ceremonies and construct their architectural wonders. And they find this thing called the void. And within the void is basically a what scientists believe wormholes are for us. Entrance in one way and out the other side is a whole new system. But they found that whole new system, and they named that system the Tau system. And in that Tau system, they could see planets unravished by their unwavering hand of greed that the Orokin Empire had already spread across the entirety of the origin system. Nothing wasn't connected, and it was all owned and ran by the Orokin in some way, shape, or form. They gave Corpus planets to run, but it was still Orokin. Now, the first part of the next, we're going to get into a couple main points, but the main thing is we're going to get into the sentience. And the sentience start the downfall of the Orokin Empire. And the sentience are because they were created to venture the void. But Orokins double-crossed them, not realizing the amount of damage that could be done having done so. And by the time they realized, it was too late. The sentient's main objective had become to eliminate the Orokin Empire, because the sentients were given an AI, and that AI reproduced for thousands of years. And the sentients, they reproduced by fission, so that was literally one splitting into two brand new beings. And they were created with a major flaw. And we'll get into that next time, guys. Thank you for watching the Tenno Legacies. I'll keep you guys up to date with all the Tenno lore that I can think of after we finish the main story, backstory, shall we say. Thanks for watching. Remember to like and subscribe. This is RD Calamity. Guys, have a wonderful day. Goodbye.